Okay, we're all set to start on leadership through corporate governance. Now, corporate governance is not something we do a lot of talking about in startup events. I don't know how many panels there have been on corporate governance at all in a startup event. It's not something that startups have traditionally thought a lot about, nor have they about, traditionally public policy, about compliance, but clearly that's changing. We've got close to 100 unicorns. We've had 100 at point. Maybe it's in the 90s now. But clearly the issues have been huge in terms of, and you only discover them when you bump into an issue and there is a lack of corporate governance that has shown up, or there is an issue which is compliance failure. And those issues often are almost existential. Then you sort of start worrying about the future of the entity and the company. So it's a short, fairly intense, I think it'll be a fairly exciting discussion on leadership through corporate governance. And I think the folks on the stage really need no introduction. But very quickly from the far side, Rajan Anandan of Sequoia. Rajan's been very close to Thai and India Internet Day for a decade plus. Deepak Bagla of Invest India, and he's also been a very close, good supporter of the ecosystem. Deep Kalra, again, completely and deeply associated with Thai and India Internet Day and ThaiCon for years. And Nayantara, you know extremely well, and she's one of the best known faces on television. So I'm not going to go further introducing. I'll just say that Deep and Deepak are also their fellow Stephanians, so there's a strong Stephanian representation on the stage here along with me. Nayantara,
You're
over
happy
to you.
Mr. Bichandani is not here, otherwise you would have said St.
Oh, yeah,
Columbus.
I know.
You would have
Actually-
said St. Columbus.
Yeah,
No, Rajan
Sanjeev
would have
would
made it to Stephen, but he grew up in Columbus. That was the issue.
Over to you, Nayantara.
Okay, so we'll get straight down to it. The only thing standing between dinner, the bar, and you guys is us. So we're going to keep it really short, sweet, and effective. I'll begin from the far side. The point is that everybody over here wants to start a startup usually says, I have $1 billion idea and I'm going to make it happen. But no one says, I'm going to have $1 billion idea and $1 billion company which is going to be really great on corporate governance. Rajan, do you think the problem is, and I think enough has been said through the day of all the various issues that exist, that we don't really need to get into it, let's look for solutions instead. Is that part of the problem, that fact that nobody dreams of building enduring companies with first principles, which will be gold standard on corporate governance?
Yeah, no, I think, look, basically, when you start up, right, initially, you're thinking big, you want to build a company, you know that it's going to take 10, 15, 20 years, right? But unless you've come from let's say, you worked at a MakeMyTrip or a Google or an Infosys or a, InfoEdge, right? You don't really, it's not top of mind, right? Like when you're a seed stage company, your first thing is, you got to launch a product, then you got to get to product market fit. And then ideally you'd be bootstrapped and become a Nitin Kamath. Otherwise you have to go raise some capital. And it's not something you think about, right? But what the reality is, world-class companies or enduring companies do have world-class governance, right? And I think one of the reasons for doing this panel, actually the single most important reason for doing the panel, is to start building awareness, right? From the time when from the very early days that you start up, that this is an important topic. Now, corporate governance means different things if you're a seed stage company or a Series A funded company or a Series B or a Series C or a Series D funded company. And I think the onus really, the first big step is building awareness. Look, by the way, there will always be the occasional, mischief
But
that
we
will
had
happen.
more
And
than
when
the
that happens,
occasional. The problem is we
I
had
know.
more than the
No, I know.
occasional
We've
now.
had a few. But by the way, we do have 100 unicorns and we have 69,000 startups. So, we've had a handful, 75,000. It goes up every day. I mean, like, did you check like an hour ago? No, you didn't check an hour ago. 75,000, he checked. So my point is, look, it has happened a few times, Nayantara, but I think it's also important to keep in mind that it's not hundreds of them, right? There have been, and there will be more to come. So I think as as we've looked at this, right? I mean, we are very clear. When we see wrongdoing, we will take action. And of course, as a firm, we've been impacted by that because it's been, but the reality is, look, when we see wrongdoing, we will take action. We will investigate, we will take action as needed. But the reality is, I think as an ecosystem, we have to realize now we're a large ecosystem, third largest ecosystem. We had $45 billion invested in the country last year, right? So I think investors have a responsibility to build more awareness and make sure that we help founders understand the importance of it. And then at different stages, make sure that different governance processes are in place, right? And we can talk more about that. What do you do at seed stage? What do you do at Series A, Series B, and then pre-IPO, and then post-IPO? And then I think founders also have a responsibility to learn about this and to keep in mind that there is a red line, and if you cross it, you may get away, but most likely
Or
you
you
will
could
not.
raise money the way we've seen in Adam Newman and WeWork later on.
No, but look, Adam Newman did a lot of things, but didn't, because in the US, by the way, if you cross the line, there is only one path. You go to jail, right?
Elizabeth
In the
Holmes.
US, you cross the red line, you go to jail, okay? Here, if you're a public company, you cross the red line, you go to jail. There's no question, in India too, right?
How often has that happened?
No, but in India, I mean, no, I mean, look, but it is true, right? I mean, we have seen quite a number actually, in the last 5 years.
Yeah, but that red line was like this ultra red and wasn't a line. Like people crossed the Red
No, I
Sea.
think, Deep, you should talk about that, no?
They crossed the Red Sea
You
and
couldn't see the line. They were so far
you
from
should,
it.
You should talk about that and you can comment on it. But I do think as founders, I think it's important to understand that it's very important that, you should understand what the red line is, and we can talk about examples and so on and so forth. And so, it's that's what it is. And the way we see it is, look, IT services, which was the precursor to the internet startup ecosystem, has the best governed companies in the country, right? TCS, Infosys, and of course we had one issue that happened, which we all know about, right? And there again, right? So it can happen even in, in an industry like that. And I think what we need to do as the Indian startup ecosystem is, as we go from here for the next 10 or 15 years, is to really make this a priority, which is why we're having this at India Internet Day. And of course, we need to have more people sitting here so that they can actually understand how important it is.
And Deepak, Bagla, with that, I'd like to come to you because, part of your responsibility also is to make sure that the dollars keep coming in, investors keep coming in. So you tell us right now, when they're coming, are they talking to you at all about corporate governance, the good, bad, the ugly in the private space? What are their asks?
So first, guys, when I walked in here, I was with Deep and Rajan, and I said, this is India. The energy here. If there's anyone out there questioning what is happening in India and the future of India, I think they need to be here. Terrific. It truly is. Full points to all of you. Phenomenal.
I'd say India Internet Day.
No, that later. Now I take it to a more serious point. To my mind, and this is where I differ from where Rajan says, corporate governance is going to be one of the most load-bearing pillar you will create in your architecture. And it has nothing to do with rules and regulations. It's got to do with you yourself individually. It is your own personal value system. I remember, and this was in 2007, we were having the committee on what should be the role of an independent director, and Mr. Damodaran at that time, who was the head of SEBI, was chairing it. And the point again came there, it is a way of thinking, it is a way of life. You can put as many sets of rules and regulations, it ain't gonna work. So you have great businesses being built by people who know in their mind the direction they want to take. And there are many others who are also looking at it from a shortcut perspective. It does not help you. Please definitely keep that in mind. Now the next thing, and you can always tell me, Deepak, it's easier said than done, when you're out there in the real world. Frankly, if that is how you think, that is how it will happen. But more importantly, what is now happening as a very strong trend, and we see that also in policy formulation where a government entity is concerned, and so will it be in every of your entities, the greater push towards transparency. Be it your investor, be it your employee, and be it yourself. If you don't meet those expectations, you're not going to find yourself into a valuation game or even to build a successful model. And that is what corporate governance is about to a large extent. Because the moment you realize that you are in a realm of transparency, I think all of us know where the lines are. It's like a tennis court. The moment the ball goes out of the line, you lost that point. I personally think, you may say that red line is too far ahead and you can't see it. I don't believe it.
But sometimes can the lines get blurred because you're trying to
Nayantara,
survive?
No. That's, as I said, it's a mindset. You want to live on the edge and you keep thinking and creating blurred lines, you know exactly. I think we all have a moral compass and an ethical one. And I'm not taking it out to be one of a moral ethical discussion. But you all know in your own minds where you're going wrong and where you're going right. And every decision you make, you're aware of it. And if you think you're in the shade which you may have a concern about, you can always check up. You have made that choice when you moved away from whatever you thought was the right one. So that is where it comes down to. And let me also say that where we are concerned, I think we do need to work on that side. You create rules and regulations, it's only up to a point. You can use a whip, but it's just to create a scare where it can be. But I think societies and businesses are created on that. And where businesses are concerned, you guys have the ability because you are starting it afresh. You have brilliant examples which have created very successful stories. And I think it is the core, it is essential, it is imperative. And nobody else but you yourself know which is the right way to follow it.
Thank you for that. And in fact, let's take that forward with Deep Kalra. Now, you've been around for decades. You've built an enduring business. It's listed in America as well. We've never heard about any corporate governance issue. So I thought it would be great to ask you, how conscious of it were you from day one? How did it start? When did you get conscious of it? Were there times when maybe you were tempted, lines seemed blurred?
Yeah, sure. And before that, I couldn't agree more with what Deepak said, actually, and I think Rajan's point too. So there's going to be a lot of consensus on this panel, probably, versus what happened in the morning, where we had opposing sides, and for some reason, I was the one getting bashed up. But that was a different topic. So I think, the point that Deepak, which really, I think, struck a chord with me, it is, corporate governance is that thing which is fuzzy. It's that thing which values, obviously, it comes from the top. But it's the thing where how you conduct yourself, as an individual, and if you're the founder, the ethos of the company will flow from there. And I will answer your question, but I'll give you a great example, which I think Sanjeev Bikhchandani was supposed to be on this panel or the morning. I don't know which one I'm filling in for him. This one. And he's not well, so he couldn't come. But I have to tell you a very interesting story, which I think people will love. And Sanjeev was also on our board for many years, 5 years on our board as a board member from 2005 to 2010 when we listed on NASDAQ. And then thereafter, he's been an advisory board. He had to step down from our board because some of his board members felt the exposure is high to our company because we're listing in the US. And I never miss an opportunity to tell him that 12 saal ho gaye, abhi tak knock on wood, kuch hua nahi. But anyway, that's it. The story is, so when Sanjeev agreed to join the board in 2005, I didn't know him that well then. In fact, probably Ty in some sort of way brought us kind of together. I knew him vaguely as a senior from school and college. And I asked him to join the board, and he joined. And then I said, here's the, how would you like to be remunerated? I was building an independent board as early as actually 2005. And I have to give credit to my first investor for that, which is now Elevation Capital, and Ravi from SAFE. And he actually was saying we should build an independent board. And I said, why do we need an independent board? And he says, because I know nothing about travel, and Ravi, and not me. So, and he says it'll be nice to have some wise men in the company around that. So I went to Sanjeev and 2 other guys who are both Americans. So Sanjeev said, okay, I'll join. And I said, here's the compensation that we've thought of. And he said, no, I don't need, typical Sanjeev, I don't need any money or whatever. I said, no, we're paying the other 2 directors this. You have a choice. You can either take it in cash or you can take it in stock. It wasn't a lot. Cash, again, guys, means like a check. No cash, like
Not stock, basically.
Yeah. So he said, no, I definitely don't need cash. Okay, stock, whatever. So he was smart. He was very smart. No, wait till the end of the story. He's the most unlike Sindhi. How many Sindhis in the room? No Sindhis?
Raise your hand.
Okay, okay, chalo, kisi ko to dhanda karna aata hai. Sir, Sanjeev is the most unlike Sindhi you'll ever meet. So I gave it to him and I wrote out the letter the next day and the CFO printed it out and we sent it to him and we said, emailed him and this is how much stock you'll get. This is the vesting and all of that. He came back instantly and as fast as he speaks, he came back, I can't accept this. I said, but you agreed to stock and this was the amount, like, is it too less? I was like worried. He's saying, no, no, no. It has to be not in my name. The stock has to be in InfoEdge's name, the Naukri's corporate name, because I will be taking company time away to spend on your board meeting, whether it's a Saturday or whatever else. I mean, for me, that was lesson 101 in corporate governance. Lesson 101, who does that? And, I said, my God, that's a huge learning. And it's just the highest level because he said, this is company stock. And then post IPO, they wanted to sell it because I don't think they wanted to hold. They made obviously very good money. And he and Hitesh said, we're going to sell your stock. I said, you don't need to tell me. It's like fully vested. You can do whatever. He said, no, just want to say we'll be out of it. But the company got that money. Now, he could have X percentage, a large shareholding. It does not matter. The thinking was just at the highest. For me, that is actually one of the finest examples. And we have to learn from that. So coming through this, I think before that, I think Rajan said something which is very true. It's what you're made of. When you set up a company, yes, it's all about the idea, and that's what you should be focused about, how you'll build it, the website, the app, etc., the technology and all. But this is not about what, this is the how. How will you go about it? And not the process is how. It's that augmented layer, which will just happen, the fuzzy stuff which will get in. So it's as fuzzy as culture, but as critical as culture. And as we all know out here, everyone here is either building a company, built a company, seen great companies. It's really the defining things about great companies, not so great companies, our founders, founding team rather, I would say, and the culture that they've built. And that's it. Rest, you pivot, you change, the market changes, a new opportunity comes, some of the best companies in the world have pivoted. And that's perfectly okay because the team was ready to and they had a culture which said, let's do it. So you have that culture, but do you have let's do it at any cost? That can't be the case. And so I think if you worked in a professional organization, it helps. I'd done 3 jobs before this, 2 of them in top-notch professional companies. Definitely that helped, whether it was ABN AMRO or G Capital. You never saw, like you saw very clear, like there was a very fine line. In banking, it's like, it's black or white. There is no gray, so there's no blurring. Also, and I think all of us, not just for me, but I think it's how you grow up and how you're brought up. So listen, this is a company, this is meant for all the shareholders. This is not your cottage industry, home enterprise you're making, which is sole proprietorship. If it's a sole proprietorship, you can do what you want, right? You are 100%. It's an extension of you. And that's why even in companies...
There would be no conflict of interest.
There's none. In Companies Law and Companies Act also, the moment it's a partnership, that's where the interesting thing starts. And I'm sure Atul can give us a lesson 101 on this. But the moment it's a company, there are different stakeholders. And fundamentally, you have to be true to all stakeholders. And transparency, absolutely. Can you actually stand up and say, this is how much we earn, this is how much we're supposed to, this is how much was paid, and these are our list of full vendors. By the way, those are the kind of reporting you have to do irrespective of where you list. It's just that in the US it's very draconian. So even if you kind of get some weird notion, I mean, you better forget about all of those things. So we are on the other side. When we listed, we started getting paranoid. We had an SEC workshop. We had a workshop on, SOX compliance. And I can tell you it was done by our auditors then. And we said, yeah, another workshop. I mean, it was bone chilling to understand what can go wrong and what the repercussions of it is. And we saw people go through that. The really hard thing, and then I'll stop here, the really hard thing about corporate governance is you can't tell. So Rajan, I was wondering when you were saying that about as an investor, even if you're sophisticated and if you're coming from the best institutes and you got the best pedigree, you can actually end up doing some of the largest corporate mischiefs possible. So you can't tell. And just because someone is, hardcore businessman, never went to, maybe didn't go to college, doesn't mean they don't get corporate governance. Of course they do. It's our job as investors, I agree, to teach them. But it's also very inherent here. So I don't know how you pick that up. And I have to tell you, frankly, as just someone on the sidelines and a very, very passive kind of investor, when I read about stuff that happens, and maybe Satyam was the first big one, then it was, I think, Rajat Gupta, McKinsey, and I'm sorry to call out these names, but it gives me real shivers, and because how do you tell what's going on? And I don't know if there's any way of figuring out. So someone said about smoke signals in the morning. They said before a fire, there'll be smoke. So you should pick out those. I guess that's the only way, and that's why there's so many guidelines, and that's why we have to adhere, and that's why we have to have processes in place. If everyone could just, swear that everything's kosher, that would be fine, but that's not
So
the real
let's
world.
ask Rajan that. So, I think it's pretty clear, all of you, there seems to be consensus about it.
You're the one who wants to blur the line. I'm getting very worried.
I'm media, I'm allowed to do whatever, right? It has to be founder down. I think all three of you seem to be in agreement with that. So then what is the role of the investor? To check the founder in case it's not happening? Because the fact is that when we talk about Indian entrepreneurship, we also talk about the Indian jugaad, right? And then where does the jugaad fit in with first principles of corporate governance, which will be gold standard?
Yeah, I think first of all, jugaad doesn't scale. I think if we really want to become the most innovative nation in the world, right, we should just move away from this jugaad thing, because jugaad just doesn't scale. But anyway, moving on. So as an investor, right, there's before you invest and then after you invest, right? So I think, look, before, like, let's take Sequoia Capital India, right? For many years, right, we do actually pretty thorough diligence. We will do diligence, financial diligence, legal diligence. And I can't tell you, actually, I've been at Sequoia 3.5 years, right? Even going back 3 years, there were companies we really liked. Like, we liked the idea, we liked the traction, the founders come across really well. But when we do the diligence, we find issues. It could be something that happened 3 roles ago. Actually, we do that. You'd be surprised. We can, but to Deep's point, by the way, you can only catch what you can catch. Meaning, you can only see what you find out, right? So we do a fair bit of that. And what I can say is...
Sorry to interrupt. When you find the funny business, is that movement of
No,
money
it could be like, for instance, right? The founders say the revenue is X. You do the financial diligence and you find out the revenue is Y. Now, if the difference between X and Y is 1%, that's one thing. If the difference between X and Y is 48%,
no, that's a lie.
That's a lie. That's a lie. Could be, no, by the way, the interesting thing, and this is what founders don't realize, it either could be an integrity issue or they just don't have the financial systems in place, right? But the thing is, it doesn't matter. We don't know what it is.
You don't want that to be your problem.
We're not going to take the time to figure out, is it an integrity issue? So I think that, for instance, right, that's what founders can do. For instance, put the basic financial systems in place up front, and then what you really want to worry about is, like, for instance, right, let's take related party transactions. In e-commerce businesses, you'd be amazed at how many companies will have people that they know buy the products, sell the products on the same platform. Now, a lot of that actually can be discovered upfront, right? So before an investment, there's diligence that's done. And I would say a large part of it can be caught there, right? What you can't catch is that inherently founder who thinks they can get away. Up until that point, because we invest very, very early, and quite frankly, most of the time there's not much there's not much there to actually do diligence on. So those do get away, and that's why you end up with profiles and saying, "Wow, can't believe that happened," right? So that's before the investment, and I think after the investment, it really is one sort of awareness building, and we are doubling down on this with, it really is, right? Because especially younger founders who haven't maybe worked for 5 or 10 years at these marquee academy companies don't know, so you have to do that. But then what it is what we've now tried to crystallize. We've always done this, but now we've said, look, as a seed stage company, you should do X or Y. As a Series A company, you should do X or Y. By Series B, you should have an independent board member. You've got to have a CFO, not an accounting manager. See, most Series B funded companies in India, they have accounting managers, not CFOs. That's a real problem. Because you've raised 30, 40, $50 million. In some cases, you've raised $100 million. You don't have a CFO. I can guarantee you're going to have a problem. Not even if the founder genuinely doesn't mean to do things that are wrong, because, your accounting manager doesn't know what they're supposed to do. They're not a CFO, right? Independent board member. You got, by Series B.
But when should you go in for a proper board with independent directors? He got lucky with his first investor
I
who
would
told
say
him.
by Series B, if you've raised a large Series B round or 15, 20, 30 million, you should have, when I say proper board, I don't mean 8 board members, okay? So somebody other than the founder, the investor, try to get one independent board member by Series B, right? By Series C, for sure, you better have a CFO. By Series B, ideally, you should have a CFO, right? You should have you should have two very important processes at Series A. One's called the whistleblower process, right? How do you really find out what's going on in a company? Like, there are a bunch of you in this room that have hundreds of employees. You don't know what's going on in a company. If you have a good whistleblower process, that frontline team member who sees something happen that is not right could highlight it, right? Because I genuinely believe that most founders may not know what's going on. Now, some do, and that's a real problem, right? You should have, at Series C, you should be doing independent audits, internal audits, not the annual audit. That should be done, and it should be done on time.
And on time.
Yeah, we're not going there. We're not going there. We're not going there. But there should be internal audits, right? Because you should be, if you're in a transactional business, how do you know, and you have team members all over the place, how do you know that the right things are being done? So after the investment, right? So depending on the stage, and I think this is where, I think as an industry, so in fact with IVCA, which is our, Indian Venture Capital Association, we're building a governance playbook, right? As an industry, that we'll launch, over the next couple of months, that actually just tries to map out at different stages, what is it, because I agree with you that at the end of the day, it's what you're born with and your value systems and all of that. But we do think, can be very helpful to articulate these things, because then, if you're a Series
Sometimes
C,
the money can go to your head as well, and we've seen some of those cases as well.
Yeah, we've seen some of that, right? So I think just mapping that out, and then the last thing, I think collectively, both the founders as well as investors, I think, the red line is a red line, right? And we should define, it's very clear what the red line is. When you have a family member who's running your finance function, that's a problem. That's not just a red line, that's a whole red ocean, right? Then there's no boat. So I think just being very clear, they're basic things, right? Related party transactions. No. That's a cause to be removed, right? So I think just being very clear so that we have a dialogue as a community about these sets of topics, I think is very important. And I think that's the dialogue we want to just talk more about, because I do think, look, genuinely founders want to build companies, right? Yes, there will be the occasional founder who thinks they can get away with it, but a lot of it is going to be, at least we believe, will be awareness building and then putting these systems in place.
And in fact, we will be taking questions from the audience, so you can keep raising your hands, and I'll keep coming to you. Deepak Bagla, a lot is always said, ease of doing business. Now, the rankings are, of course, just Delhi, Mumbai. We take that. A lot has been done to make procedures far more simple. But, there are many entrepreneurs who might be 22, 25, 26. It's tough to follow the various procedures that are out there. Don't you think, as an important stakeholder of the ecosystem, you guys also need to respond by just simplifying things, making it easier to have a gold standard in corporate governance?
So let me, on that one, before I come back to what Rajan was saying, I think a lot has been done, but a lot more needs to be done. So far we've just reached, let's face it, this is one of the most complex places on the planet to do business, at least all the way until 2014-15. I'll give you a small instance. The only country in the world, and which was one of the most complex to do business and overwhelming, which did not have an investment promotion agency to help investors, was India until 2015. Every other country in the world had one. Just think about it. And after having said that, there's a long way to go. The thing is that we are now at a point where we've already done away with 30,000 odd policies and interventions. And I'm not saying it's just made your life into a paradise or a utopian land. There's much more to be done, and I think that's being done. Let me just share with you what happened. So 2018 end. The founder of one of the top 3 PE funds of the world was in our office. Why I can't just give you his name, because I don't have his permission yet to do it. He'd come to our office to spend half an hour. He wanted to meet a few startups. We had 24 of them. He canceled the entire day's engagements and spent 6 hours. Walked into my office after the conference room. Had invested his personal money in 5 of them. So I was asking him that, and before that we'd had some discussions on corporate governance. He told me there are 2 points to corporate governance. He said that one is any promoter who's looking at a long run of his business, on scaling it on a global level, he said knows the value of it and will do well. That is one of the things he would always look at when he would get into a discussion with the promoter. What is the vision line of the promoter? He said for him, that was the tops. be it on the PE side or the VC side. He would just want to sit down that is this person wanting to do a QTA, or is it somebody who really wants to run and build the business? And he felt that whosoever wanted to run and create a long-term business will not take shortcuts. And to my mind, if I had to look at it, and the more I started analyzing, because my previous life was that of an investor for 7 years, running a fund, the more I thought of it, the more important that became. Because if I have to look at one basic thing, that becomes the most important element of it all. And probably in the Indian context, we did not have too many which were looking at it from a long-term basis. They were looking at short runs and seeing how you can get out of it. And that sort of takes it to a large point. I think that remains the crux of the business which you have to create. Now coming to the second point, Rajan, which you mentioned. You were taking it through Series A, Series B, etc. You were talking about it on the quantum of fund which came in. He spoke about it in terms of the team size. He said that the first thing you have to focus on any time, is transparency. You build that as the core of your culture from day one. According to him, the real challenge starts when you cross 250 employee strength. He says, until then, it's a small family. You know what each one is doing. It's not about the funding levels. It was about the team. And he said the biggest challenge is when you cross 700. Now, I don't know where he got those numbers from, but the more you start thinking, you guys are the ones which are actually doing it. You might want to see how you can keep going that culture and keep maintaining that transparency. And he said, the only thing which helps in that scaling is the culture of absolute transparency from day one on everything. And he said, ideally, I would like to see a company which publishes its balance sheet every day.
Every day.
Every day. End of day balance sheet. He said that will be the day when this is happening. By the way, I've challenged my team that before the end of next year, we will be doing it on a daily basis.
Every day. That's platinum. I saw you nodding when he said 250 people. It was like as if it was your own experience. The question I also want to ask
Actually, I nod whenever he says anything.
Acha. That's usually the case. Now when somebody comes from New Delhi, the corridors of Bagla. Everybody keep nodding.
Respect.
The question I also wanted to ask you was, we discussed Series A, Series B, 250 employees, 700 employees. There may be a lot, especially in this winter season, where you're literally living day to day. You're trying to increase your cash runway. You might be borrowing money from your mother, your father, your neighbor, your chacha, your chachi, like whatever. You're not going to, at that point, be worrying about showing your balance sheet every day or every quarter. It's just about survival. The question I'm trying to ask you is that it's usually when things are going bad is when you'll be tempted to take a decision to survive, which could haunt you later. How, did you ever face that? And when you mentor someone, then what is the advice to give? Because that time it's just about survival.
No, I think actually that's very true and very real. Because I think that's when things get, so let's say one of us really keen to just build a great company out there with all the right intentions, everything. Starts the company, manages to get Series A, everyone, Sequoia does their background check, search ducks, everything's fine, they get it, couple of guys. They go along the way, things get tough, whether the winter of funding or something else, things get tough, they're not getting the next round, etc., etc. Interesting accounting manager, creative accounting manager joins, okay? Whatever, I'm making it up, maybe not accounting, right? Anyone else, but normally it starts from there. And then says, one of these days when you're spending 14, 16 hours in office every day and you're trying to make ends meet and says, ये सब ठीक है boss, ये तो सब चल रहा है, but if we take money from so and so, then maybe there is a possibility of doing this. And by the way, there's enough wink, wink, nudge, nudge investors also out there. They won't be out here, they won't be in the tie, this thing, but they are enough. And I think we are all aware of them, who have a very clear deal. Take money from us, this much is for you, this much is this thing. This happens. I mean, it sounds shocking, but it's true. Now, how desperate are you? That's values. What is values? Only when you're put under the pump, right? It's only under pressure. When there's no pressure, everything's great. Mohit Bhatnagar said in the morning a very interesting thing about, similar to your point of crossing the line, which is getting pulled up by a cop. And when you're speeding, and most people, Indians will say, but itne log speed kar rahe hain, unko pakdo, versus saying, yeah, I was wrong, kind of thing. So that's a very interesting way to look at it. Like, listen, are you policing yourself enough? Did we have temptation? I think we're very lucky we didn't. We had horrible times. But I think the maximum we would do is like, listen, agree within us how much cuts we can take in salary, convert that into stock at the next funding round, which actually, I don't know, that just seemed like the logical benchmark to get. And to go ahead and do that, and luckily when the first real investor came in, I think it was part of almost maybe even some deep-rooted even fear that if you don't declare everything now, something will come to haunt you. It's later on. So I don't even know why. But few rules I learned and I set for myself is be the first one to give the bad news. So if your board figures out something's going wrong and you have not told them, that really shakes the confidence. And now when I sit on boards, I see the same thing. If I hear it from the market, and you will hear it from the market, you'll come to know, and then you'll say, sorry, you want to say? Yeah, it'll make you very uneasy because then the mistrust starts. And that's the beginning, which is what else is she or he, why not say she this time, we always say he. What else is she not telling me, right? We should be equal opportunity, only, yeah. It's always,
On
right?
this front, he wants to.
No,
Only
but-
on this time he has said she.
By the way, it's on record in the morning panel. I said if you take women entrepreneurs, they're much less likely to do anything wrong on governance. It's true. It's proven. There's actual factual evidence on that. So what else are you not? And it just takes that much for mistrust to start. It's a relationship. That relationship mistrust starts is the same. The relationship you have as a board member, as an independent. And by the way, independents can't really check your books. Even the chair of your audit committee at the end of the day is relying on stuff that you're giving them. And how much time are they going to spend? 10 hours a quarter? Maximum? 1 day? 2 days? Not more than that. What are you going to, if you are hell-bent on finding devious ways of breaking the rules, no one can find you. But one day, it'll blow up. It'll blow up because you'll get carried away. And, we've seen some of these things blow up. And I think we were also lucky to grow up, at least to come out of college. So I graduated from MBA school in 92. Companies like Infosys were really making their mark. And they were at least for all the early internet first wave guys, it was IT and ITAS. And Infosys was very motivating. And this thing, why? Because look at the people who set up Infosys. Look at the quality of governance they put in. Look at the equity in the system and the equitable nature in which they distributed it. It's not just folklore, it's true. So I think we were all excited about those kind of companies, and definitely Infosys was up there. Today, as we always say, good governance is not just qualitative, it's quantitative. So same to same, two companies in the same area, same business, same kind of industry. Let's say one is a Tata company. Go and check up, they enjoy a higher multiple. Because that's what Tatas have earned after decades of being, or century of being that kind of company. Anything, same to same. Why? Because of, they know, shareholders know governance theek hai wahan. And that is the kind of confidence. So it's actually good for business. But I love what you're doing, Rajan, at IVCA. I think it's needed. I'm thinking about this on this panel. I don't think young entrepreneurs know.
Yeah, a playbook you need to have.
So, no one teaches us this, maybe in MBA school, but everyone doesn't go to MBA and probably shouldn't also. But that, if we start, and I think TIE should play that role, and saying, okay, listen, in a very simplified manner, do a workshop. We do workshops for legal, we do workshops for M&A, so many other workshops. We'll start doing this as a workshop so that at least people know what is it. Because in some areas, you actually may not know. This whole vendor thing, conflict of interest, related party transactions, it's very clear outside, again, if you've had a SOX compliance kind of workshop. Here people don't know, and very often you'll go to someone who you think is the best in, class, but happens to be someone who's connected. Well, guess what? You have to then declare that. You have to declare it and recuse yourself from the decision making of choosing that vendor very strictly. And that's the way we do it. So every day there's a recommendation for a hire and there's a recommendation for doing business, right? We are a mid-sized company, that happens. So the only way is to actually copy a couple of extra people, always your CFO, your internal auditor, everyone else, and say, please take this forward on merit. I'm recusing myself. I happen to know this person. And,
Yeah.
I just don't even need to know the decision at all till it's done. And but that has to be the culture. You can't write that mail and then pick up the phone and tell the guy, yaar, isko dekh lena, main janta hu is ladke ko, kind of thing. You can't do that.
And Rajan, when should these processes come in?
Whistleblower comes in there, by the way.
Okay, that's what I wanted to
Because
ask.
that is your early warning. That's the smoke. Someone always knows. If you've got creative accounting manager, but he also has two papoos working for him, and one of them definitely knows what's going on. Does he have the, what's the parliamentary language? Guts to report that. He'll only have that if he can do it anonymously through a whistleblower policy. Otherwise, he won't. He'll lose
And
his
that
job.
should all come up during a Series B. That's your
I
theory.
mean, a whistleblower process, like, there's no, I mean, you should do it as soon as you have 20, 30 people because, it doesn't take a lot to do it. Maybe 50 people, maybe, right? I actually think, the 250 number is interesting, Deepak, but given how quickly our startups grow, right? Because they grow from, just after you find product market fit, you'll find within 7 months they have 200 people. Which means you've hired all these people like very, very quickly, right? And
So therefore, the thing is that when you're scaling, you have to scale it with this, so that the culture exists and it's founded down, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
what I'm trying to get at is that do not scale unless you also have the systems and
No, I
process
think,
in
look,
place.
that's unrealistic, right? So you have to, in many ways, right? Like with a very fast-growing startup that has product market fit, the reality is you are building the engine while mid-air. I mean, that's a reality. Because you're growing that fast because you've got product market fit. And by the way, whether you like it or not, you're going to grow because, customers are pulling it, right? I'm not talking about discount-driven growth. Anyway, that's over. That was last year. This year, you have to make money on every order. So you just have to put these things in place, right? Like let's take a posh committee. Right? If you have 50 people, please have a posh committee. Especially if you have any women in the company. Have one.
I think you have to by law. Yeah.
But,
So now,
but startups.
And it's
I know,
not-
They
I know.
don't have, right? Like, let's...
no, but it's.
But you're right, that's what he's saying. You do.
No, there's a law now. You don't
You
have
have
a
to.
choice. I don't
You
know at
have
what
to, but it
stage it
doesn't
kicks off.
happen.
It's not to do with people. It's not to do with number of people. 10 people. It's at 10.
There you go.
Yeah.
But we all know that...
Even if they're all men, by the way, there has to be posh.
Yeah, I know.
Even if they're all men, of course it is.
Oh, we're coming from good Colombo.
Okay, any questions as well? You got some of the best in business to figure out corporate governance. Go ahead.
Let's get a mic. Do we have mics? Use one of these. Yeah. No, there's mic. There's mic over there.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kapil and I represent Plans Kharido. I will not get into that thing, but it's a fanboy moment for me. Good evening to all of you once again. Thank you, Nayantara, for holding this thing. Deep, sir, this is more of a fanboy moment. Why I say this is because you have been unknowingly be a part of every Indian's journey when he travels. And I would like to mention this thing, that I have booked my honeymoon with MakeMyTrip only because of one factor, that was trust. That if I'm doing it with MakeMyTrip, I'm gonna be safe in many dimensions. I should, and of course, one of my parents' trip. So my question to you specifically is, how do you, because I understand that business in this era cannot only survive on cashbacks and couple of things. How do you maintain this trust over decades? So that would be something that we at Plants Kharido can learn, because we deliver plants. Plants is something that people go to nurseries and buy. We want to change that thing, but we would really love to learn this thing in the years to come.
Firstly, you'll make a very good entrepreneur because I love your way you did the pitch. It's very nicely done, certainly well done. So we now know what Prats does. So I think trust has to be earned. It is the most important thing. It has to be earned. Actually, I tell all new joinees in the company, I actually knew everyone till about 200. That magic number is 150. There's a book around that which says 150 you can know people, and then after that you lose. I used to actually, when we went for offsites, make cheat sheets and know people's face. I went to about 200, 250, and then it falls apart. So I tell everyone when they join, I do a session once a month with even new joinees now, is that you have a fresh start is chance to build a reputation. And your reputation is built by every email that you send, by every piece of work, line of code that you write, whatever you do. Similarly, I also say that the biggest brand you're building is not MakeMyTrip or Redbus or Go Ibibo, whatever. The biggest brand you're actually building is brand you or brand me, right? So you have to earn that. And it's pretty, I think it's very, very, it takes time and it's a little hard to build and earn, but then you enjoy the fruits of it. But it's very easy to lose. It's reputation again, right? It's very, very easy to lose. So if you don't do it right, so I think it's sustained, good work, good experience, and it's not like things don't go wrong. Ask me about it. I still look at a lot of the customer issues. But when they go wrong, can you make them up? And do you want to make them up? So really in the beginning when we had no money, we were totally bootstrapped, we had no money, we used to do US, India, NRI travel. And if we were in the wrong, the internal thing was give a coupon of average ticket value as $800,000 or $50 on the next purchase. And people say, give us money now. We say we don't have money to give now. But on your next, we were essentially giving away our commission. But we said we'll give it on your next purchase or you can give that to anyone else. We could do that. So I think it starts there. Are you willing to, when it's gray in a customer service case, are you willing to err on the side of the customer? Customer must be right. And that's what we do. So in refund cases, it's really hard when companies go, when airlines went bankrupt. Right now we're solving for, I was called by Mr. Piyush Goyal and he said, please, you have to solve these cases. They gave us a list on these consumer, this thing. And I said, boss, we've been trying, but in 2 weeks, we'll put it on war footing and on mission mode. We'll come back with you with a report card. We will make it up wherever we can. If the airline can't, I need a push from your office and there's someone there who runs this consumer affairs. I'm forgetting the exact name of the consumer grievance cell or something like that they have. Very smart lady. And Mrs. Khare, I think. And I said, you know, we will tell you we need your help because if you can also push that airline, now where the airline's bankrupt, then we have to think about what, because that happened with a few airlines too, international. So we will make it up. And that's how I think over time, little by little by little, you earn trust. And old brands, that happens. And you also know someone's listening. So I've heard of cases where people say we don't want to book with the airline directly because when we book with them and something goes wrong, especially during COVID, there's no one who's listening because it's impossible to get through to them. But we'd rather book with you because we have one neck to catch and a neck that we can, which is fine. I mean, I'd take that every day. I think that's a good place to be in if people are willing to do that. But travel's tricky, but you know, trust is everything.
He said something and think so. Rajan, I'm going to ask you that if somebody has lied to you or made, for some reason trust has been broken or there's mistrust, would you give a second chance? And I'm talking about corporate governance over here. Would you give a second chance?
Yeah, I think, look, so there's two things, right? I think one is before we invest, right? There's zero tolerance because like either there's something, either there's an issue or there isn't, or at least one we can understand, right? I think so. Once we've invested, like at the end of the day, we are partners with founders
Then it's a
for
marriage.
a long period of time. We are partners, right? So what we try to do is, look, for instance, right? If there is an issue that is identified of serious misgiving, right? So let's say a whistleblower comes forward and says there is a real issue with accounting, related party transactions. The board will investigate. That's going to happen, right? Now, you know, what happens, and it'll be an independent investigation done, you know, with the right way, with the exact, you know, and depending on the outcome of that, but it is a independent investigation that's done, right? We will absolutely do that, regardless of what's happening, right? And then the outcome of the investigation then determines the actions that are taken, right? It could be, look, there was no issue here. It was an employee that, you know, was
Disgruntled employee,
disgruntled
yeah.
employee, and therefore there's no, or maybe there is an issue, and the issue was serious, or maybe there was an issue, but it's not exactly what was highlighted. So I think that's the process that we go through, right? Now, if it is, for instance, right, like for instance, we try to really make sure that from the very early stages of a company, your financial system should be in place, right? I mean, I don't know how many of you are early stage founders, right? Please make sure your financial systems are in place because otherwise, like, if you don't have it, you can't really report, especially if you have any investors, even if you've raised angel money, you can't report what your real numbers are. And then reporting numbers that are not real, I mean, the fastest way you lose trust with your investors, doesn't matter whether they're angel investors, whether they're venture investors, Series A, Series D, growth investors, I mean, you can't do this as a public company, you go to jail, okay? Your numbers are not right. I mean, I can't tell you how many startups look, there is only one way to define revenue. Okay, there's no like 17 ways to define revenue. You'd be amazed. Like, what is this? Revenue? No, no, no. Yeah, it's revenue, but you know, contract is coming. What is this? It's not revenue. Contract is coming is not revenue. You know? So I think these are the things that we have to get better at, right? But look, at the end of the day, once we invest Nayantara, we are long-term partners to founders. But if we see wrongdoing, you know, we have to take action.
We have to wrap, so we'll make this a final question.
Rajan, this question is to you, and not trying to put you on the spot, but you know, there's also a little bit of hypocrisy amongst the VC community, and I'm just going to use an American example to distance away from India. And, you know, we were talking about giving someone a second chance, and let's use Adam Newman as an example, right? He just recently got refunded, you know, largest check by A to Z, so it's not you guys. How do you justify that, and what signal does that really send to the entrepreneurial community? You know, what does that really mean? And to me, you know, it basically means like it's okay to do wrong. Someone will give you a second chance, and we, in a promoter-driven culture as India, we see this all the time. So I'd like to hear a comment on that.
So I think, look, Gautam, we didn't fund Adam Newman the first time or the second time. So it's really hard for me to comment on that case. But what I can say is, look, I do think, look, let's take aside Adam Newman, because you know we're not close to that situation in first or second time around, right? But I think, look, we have to separate founders who did wrong, meaning there was an ethics issue, there was fraud. Okay, I mean that is sort of that's black and white. I mean either there was fraud or there was no fraud. Okay, and then there is, you know, creating the consciousness, right? That is that's a vision and a mission and a selling of something that somebody bought, by the way. Somebody did buy that mission and vision, right? Now, you know, if in the case of WeWork, I haven't seen anything. Look, I don't know that company, okay? I haven't seen anything that said there was fraud. If there was fraud, I doubt very much any tier one investor would have invested, right? That was Theranos. She's, you know, that, you know what's happening there. When there's fraud in the US, there is only one outcome. You go to jail. If you get investigated, you go to court, and you're going to go to jail, right? I think where it gets murky is, you know, founders who there was a mission and a vision and too much growth at any cost, etc. So that's sort of how I think about it. Now, what I can say is speak for the firm that I'm from, which is Sequoia Capital. Look, you all have seen, we've gotten a lot of, we've got a lot of pushback from media, from the ecosystem about taking these hard actions. We are very clear. We see wrongdoing, we will take action. Every single time, regardless of consequences. But we will do it the right way. We will do investigations, we will do that, right? And man, I can tell you, if we've taken, we're not going to invest again. No chance, zero.
It's the right thing to do, but it's too late also then, because then forensics, everything else comes into play where it's too late. So I think what I like your ex ante way of looking at this, coming fresh out of CCI kind of thing, rather than ex post, which is that you actually are going to have this playbook at IVCA, which hopefully will be, I think we have to do that. Otherwise, I think it's just too late. You still have to do damage control or whatever it's called, or for your reputation again of your firm. That's super critical. You'll have to do.
And also, if you did a survey of the Indian ecosystem, right? At early stages, of the 69 or 75,000 companies, I bet you only like a few thousand possibly even know what corporate governance means. What does it mean, right? Like at the end of the day, I genuinely believe, right? Almost all our founders are in it to build companies. They're in it for the right reasons. They don't want to do the wrong things, right? So I think, Deepak, Deep, to your point, I think the onus is upon us as an industry to make sure that we build, if we can get corporate governance to have the same level of awareness that the word unicorn does, we will build the healthiest, most sustainable startup ecosystem on the planet, right? Everybody knows. You met a startup founder that doesn't know what a unicorn is? Everybody knows what a unicorn is. Now, of course, what kind of unicorn? We don't. That's different. That's deep is the point of what kind of unicorn is it, right? So
It
let's
can't be
have that
mythical,
challenge, right?
and it can't be mythical. The
Yeah, let's
corporate
say-
governance can't be mythical.
Yeah, corporate governance is very specific, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what we've got to do. We've got to really, really ramp up, clearly define what it is, build awareness, and then over time, I think it'll grow. So maybe we'll take a goal as, tie Delhi, as Startup India, as IVCA, the media. We need a
We also,
partnership
yes,
with media,
yes. Not
right?
everyone
To
is
really
like
build
us.
awareness on, this corporate governance stuff.
So we are completely out of time, and as you can see, it's a wrap.
Thank you.